Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling Politics 2100 mini-series on media power hyphen introduction to the theory and the practice. So, I'm starting this mini-series on media criticism, basically, uh, and how media shapes our reality in ways that are not acknowledged by the media and also by politicians, and often not acknowledged in by people or in ordinary everyday life. It's not noticed by people, and I've made hints about this idea, or I've talked a little bit as an aside about this in various episodes, but I wanted to devote a series of episodes that specifically focus on media and how media operates in our political economic system, in our society overall. And there are some very specific examples that are inspiring me to do this right now, but I wanted to first just sort of create a framework where these examples will can be hung upon and will carry some weight. So you, if you are listening, and maybe be able to take these specific examples and start to use those ideas in your own life to decode what's going on in the media, or to consume media more critically and more thoughtfully, and potentially also to create your own media, like I am, obviously, in social media. At least there's the promise of that. There's the potential for that. I'm hoping to realize some of that with these videos here. But anyway, so this introduction, though, I made in the title to talk about theory and practice. So I think we need to take a step back and try to understand media, because it's often wedged in to our general theories of society, general theories of politics, of economics. It's thought to be either entirely transparent in some areas, while there is a specific media studies focus that some people have, including, for instance, Noam Chomsky, focused a lot about that in his concern with regard to U.S. imperialism and how the media shaped foreign policy in particular, but also other forms of government policy. I think he had some interesting ideas, but I have a slightly different take than he has. I think he had a theory of society embedded in his media framework that is not exactly, I would say, correct, but maybe just not the framework about society that I would have and that I would want to promote as being most enlightening or most interesting. So, but anyway, so basically media allows, so in discourse, and more generally, there's discourse theory, which is something that has developed in the last 50 years or so. And in discourse is what media generates is discourse. Discourse is organized language, and often also it has a visual language. So there's beyond discourse, there's also a visual iconography, you could say, that is, and there's also narratives that are both visual and can be verbal as well. So media operates with both, with language, with sound, with tone, with creating narratives out of those things, and images, also lots of images. And so language is the thing that we have, I think, the most of us have the most clear handle upon in some ways, and we have the most chance to really do logical thinking and do create processes in our own minds, especially in when we're thinking about democracy as being a major project that we all have to involve ourselves in and to improve by our own participation in democracy. That language is one area where we can actually create democratic outcomes, because we can use our logical minds and create sequences and criticize other perspectives, and then come to maybe some agreement or some kind of compromise with another position, another group of people who maybe have a different perspective than you. And that's very hard to do, if, for instance, in visual languages, or I don't want to use the language, but in iconography, in imagery. Okay, so anyway, so we are creatures that have both language abilities. Also, we have imaginations, and we have the ability to see images, obviously, and to hear languages, and so forth and so on. So this is very basic stuff, but I think it helps to take a step back to understand the role of media in our society and media in our politics. So anyway, media is a way in which we understand and the world around us, and it helps frame it. And so our education is in part based on forms of media like books or more increasingly internet websites and various kinds of applications that are built to help people learn things. And that's all forms of media that are a combination of imagery and language, or sound and imagery and visual imagery and language. So that all of those things help shape our perspective on things. They don't totally create our perspective on things. We are not like the ducks that Konrad Lorenz studied, or the ducklings. We are not entirely imprinted upon by media and then become sort of biological robots that do exactly as the media dictate to us. But we have opportunities to generate our own. We dream. We have our own imagery that we create in our minds, both in sleep, but and also in our own perspective on things. And we can now, in our age where we have smartphones and so forth and so on, we can create imagery. And obviously artists are specialists who can create imagery from both computer tools and also manual tools, so forth and so on, and cameras and things like that. So anyway, I'm sorry to go to all this very basic and seemingly bland background to try to give you a sense that media organizations, now news media, I'm focused mostly on news media, but you can also think of cultural media, about movie studios, and also game manufacturers, game programmers, so forth and so on, are all creators of media that frame our understanding of the world, that create both imagery that we can repeat in our heads, that we find more or less compelling, that we engage with in interactive ways, if it's an interactive game or website or so forth and so on, but also that we can also operate upon to some degree. And in democracy, though, we have the opportunity to try to change, either through our actions or activities. We try to change this inflow of media and so forth and so on. But taking a step back from that, there's enormous advantages to the wealthy people in our society, the ruling class in particular, the people who can own the means of reproduction, in the sense of the means of image reproduction and production, and the means of also of broadcasting messages through the internet, through the airwaves, so forth and so on, and employ people who are specialists in creating imagery or in creating narratives or creating writing, or who go out and report on things, reporters, um, and also to own certain properties or aggregation sites where people tend to turn to, which are the big brands where people trust them either through the cable systems in the United States or in other countries, or websites and so forth and so on, and large newspapers, large news organizations where people have tended to entrust with their diet of images and narratives about the world and news about the world. So literally, people are looking for news. They're looking for information about the world, which they will either find it important to them because they have a particular need for it, or they're alarmed by it in some sense that it's something that we are, as animals, are programmed to be alerted by novelty and by things that are new, and we are interested in those things because it helps us to avoid danger. It helps us find things that are important to us, food, mates, so forth and so on. And anyway, that all these things are important to us to allyship with other people. Anyway, this information that we're seeking can be manipulated and is manipulated by these large companies in different ways. It's steered in different ways. It's not a clear glass, so to speak, view of the world where you're looking through this piece of glass and it's just simply that's the way the world is. It's packaged for you because you don't have all the time to go look out at the things in the world, and these organizations that are the news organizations, or even beyond the news organizations, the culture production companies in various forms that create sort of big scale narratives that are either entertaining or compelling in some form or another. We are, we get those things and we want to see them. We enjoy seeing them, or we feel like we need to see them because we feel like that puts us in touch with the world and in touch with other people. So we're relying on these organizations to structure this world. And so the framing of, now this is in discourse theory, this is more, but actually it comes from the film. It's not just, it becomes from in film analysis. The director of film frames the shot, and the photographer frames a shot in a particular way. It could be a documentary film, or and literally, you're not just getting a pure dose of some kind of reality. You have the impression of getting that reality. You have the sensation of it, but it is always, in some way or another, filtered through another person's idea about what you should see, and so, or another group of people, and so that framing gives the media a power. So this is why I'm calling this series Media Power. So the ownership of various kinds of media confers a great deal of power upon those companies or individuals / companies that own those media, that media, and they can manipulate that media to suit a personal agenda, an agenda of a class, of a economic class, and they can use that also to subtly or not so subtly undermine the interests of the people who are watching the media, even though there is overall in this environment, in this social exchange that's going on, an agreement somehow, or an implied agreement, that what's being given is supposed to be a benefit to you. You are the customer, so to speak, or and so there's a kind of a give and take, or implied a give and take, but even though most of the time people are passively receiving these messages. So this is inevitable. So when I am not posing this as a as someone who believes that one can have this sort of window-like view of, you know, where one is looking out, or that you as a person can go out and see everything that a media organization collects, or see all the different scenes from reality that they are. Now, the closer you are to that, the more gripping it is, and the more of a sense you have of actually having a real access to that. And so, social media, among other things, gives more of a chance for people to go around a little bit some of those gatekeepers you have in media organizations. And on the other hand, you are selecting some of those social media posts, so to speak, that from your own biases. So your biases might also lead you to become more narrowly focused on certain things and not broaden out your view of the world. So there is a benign thesis or benign hypothesis about a media company directing your attention one way or the other, saying, well, they are people who are extraordinarily open-minded and extraordinarily open to reality, and are willing to change their perspective based on that reality, and are out there seeking things that undermine even their own interests. But unfortunately, you know, and this is something that there is no theory about what would be the ideal media organization. There are various combinations of various countries where they seem to have a more reality-based media, or the media seems to be more open to reality, and also to suitable for a democratic process in that country. But anyway, that mediation function of the power, the choice function that the media specialists have, creates a bias, okay? And that those people, there is an economic bias that, even though there is this overall this ethic, this sense of this game that's being played, saying, no, we are giving you a window on the world, and also we do not have, our bias is toward the truth, okay? That is it's not totally wrong, but it is being steered. Their truths are being steered in certain ways that are uncomfortable. Truths are being avoided. There are some truths that are shared and other truths that are not. There are also some organizations now which are not even focused so much on truth, though they claim otherwise, that are focused only on propaganda and only on creating certain feelings in their viewers. I'm talking about Fox News, among others, and also other far-right media organizations that are about stirring up their base and using fictions to do that. So not focusing on reality. So anyway, so the media has a power, and it has a power to do better. It has a power to do some good, but there are also real economic interests that the media have, including, among other things, supporting their advertisers. So there's a conflict between advertiser-driven media of various kinds and their mission, which is to inform people, because keeping the advertisers happy is not, they are not neutral, the advertisers. The advertisers have enormous economic interests, which among other things, it motivates them to buy expensive advertising on media. And so, so that's one, the advertisers are one biasing feature in the media. Another is simply ownership by billionaires or, you know, centimillionaires. And those billionaires and centimillionaires are not are not devoid of their own personal interests. In fact, they're often very, very um, uh, strongly partisan in their own in favor of their own interests. And we see that, for instance, with Elon Musk buying Twitter as a vehicle for his own political interests, even though he denies all the time that he does not have these interests. He now I think he is. It has gone against some of his economic interests in terms of his mismanagement of Twitter, and so it's not clear if it's really in his certainly short and medium term economic interest to own Twitter. So Twitter is not your traditional media, but it's a social media platform. It's one I use a lot, and it seems as though Musk is trying to bias that and bias its architecture in favor of his interest and his ideas about truth and so forth and so on, and which are not. I mean, he's been shown again and again to have just to be a liar in many cases, and to be simply someone who is trying to sell now his particular ideology, but in a stealth manner using Twitter. And so, and in social media, this biasing function in terms of algorithms and so forth and so on is also there. So the framing function and the power exerted by elites within the media, either elite employees like editors, executive editors, or publishers, the owners of various media companies, like Rupert Murdoch is one of the people who has exerted his power most powerfully, you could say, or most effectively of almost anyone in the last 20, 25 years in the United States. And he's done it through media. And in some ways, Elon Musk has a similar ambition to exert his power, to exert power for his particular interests or his particular vision, which is mixed up with his interests. And it is not the now. Sorry to stop there in the middle of a sentence there. There is a fiction that is often a patrician myth in the United States media. The idea that, like, for instance, the New York Times or the Washington Post, these are the two leading news media, print news media companies in the United States, have, or at least the most influential ones, that they had these sort of families that the Sulzbergers in the case of the Times, or the Grahams in the case of the Post, who had this sort of visionary idea about news and so forth and so on, and they had these high ethical principles which they represented through their various management decisions at these companies. And those companies are no longer controlled by these families, or the Sulzbergers still have some power at the New York Times, but anyway, they're not in the same control as that they were 30, 40 years ago. But anyway, the idea of this sort of patrician, upper class, elite morality or ethical commitment to news and to informing the public is, while that there has to be some commitment to that in order to have a news product, whether that it's entirely corporate ownership or whether it's family ownership of a particular news outlet. It is it's a exercise in that you're rolling the dice with your entire society in a way if you're relying only on the beneficence of these rich people, and that there needs to be some form of regulation or some form of ways to, in indirect ways, create a media environment that is more conducive to a democracy to flourish than the one we currently have. I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself in talking about this, but our media has created many different problems in our society, and its biases have created problems by shaping our perspective, the perspective of certain important groups, including to some degree myself, but other people even more so. I believe that's why I'm, creating these videos, where the bias of those, outlets have created a problem where people can no longer make informed decisions about politics and can't really, and their governing of themselves is inhibited because of the information environment they live in, the information created by media companies, by both the new social media companies, but also by the old traditional media companies, even also publicly run companies like PBS. So anyway, so this is, and I'm not holding out a utopia. Contrast this with utopia where there's no steering whatsoever. There, in a society where we live in a complex society where you have this division of labor, of people who are informers and informants, and then the population who doesn't want to spend all its time gathering information about remote places in the world, or just from Washington D.C. So they're relying on this process, this, you could say, this trade, or this, but it can become very quickly a hierarchical process where the owners of the media and the corporations that also own the media collude with other corporations and also their own particular economic interests themselves to steer people's attention in ways and shape our consciousness. And that's where, you have a kind of a paranoid reaction to media critiques of various kinds, or people who raise, you have, for instance, Donald Trump specialized in media criticism of a particular kind. It was always biased, and it is always biased in favor of his own very, very narrow political and power interests. And so, but he created a narrative that was also a form of media criticism, and used it for his own political, and uses it for his own political benefit, or what he perceived to be his political benefit. But there needs to be a more nuanced, and unfortunately it's a little bit complicated, a nuanced view of media as there's steering of consciousness going on. Your attention is being steered. And what I'm trying to do in this media series is trying to show how your attention is being steered, and that some of that steering is going to happen anyway. But at least if you know that the steering is happening, you can talk back, and you can also look for other outlets. Let's hope that there are more outlets and more sources of information that you prefer their form of steering, or at least you acknowledge that they're steering it in ways that are beneficial overall to you, that you feel like they're not steering in ways that are antagonistic to your interests. And right now we have media companies that steer in some ways steer our attention in ways that are not helpful to our own survival, really, as a species. So we need to at least either get them to do a better job, or also to at least to be informed consumers, and to constantly talk back in any way we can to those media sources, so they understand that we are not fooled, and that we accept some of their work as being valid, but other parts of their work as being, propaganda, essentially, of some form or another. So anyway, so this is the intro. I hope it's not too confusing or too vague. And I'm going to talk more specifically about very distinct problems that we're facing in the way the media is reporting about, among other things, the Ohio train derailment, about Ron DeSantis, about trans rights, about, there's a whole series of issues that are being shaped and massaged by various media accounts that we need to be at least conscious of and aware of. Maybe not entirely rejecting we're saying, you're steering me this way, but I understand your perspective. If you're open about your perspective, I would appreciate it more. So anyway, I hope following episodes will clarify and enlarge upon this idea about what the media power is. And media power exists. There's economic power, there's political power of the state, but there's media power is there as well. So, and it's not all about the high ethical goals of media corporations and the ethics of heroic reporters and so forth and so on. And there are many heroic reporters, or there are some heroic reporters who do brave work to inform other people about the world. So this is not a diminishment of that activity, but there's also needs to be a recognition that there is a power in it, and the power can be used or misused, and that's the sort of the framework that I'm trying to work with here. Anyway, please share your thoughts in the comments below, and I hope if you got anything out of this video, if you would like it, that would be great. And also, if you are getting anything out of Politics 2100, please subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.